Imagine walking down a busy street doing nothing unusual, and suddenly realizing that everyone is staring at you, judging you, turning you into something you are not. It was an ordinary day in the city. People hurried to work, buses were crowded, shop windows glittered with new displays. Everything looked normal. But in the middle of the crowd, one figure stood out. A man in a white coat. He was an ordinary person. Not rich, not poor. Not very old, not very young. The only thing that made him different was his white coat. And this coat, against the gray of the city, immediately caught every eye. From that moment on, his walk was no longer just a walk. Every step turned into a stare, every movement into a judgment. At first, only a few people noticed. A child pointed, a group of young men laughed quietly, a woman glanced at him for too long. The man realized that everywhere he went, eyes followed him. At first he tried to dismiss it. Coincidence, he thought. People look at each other all the time. But the repetition made it heavier. He began to exist not in himself but in the eyes of others. And this was unsettling. Because after a while he no longer thought of who he was. He thought only of how he was seen. Then something strange happened. One day the crowd pushed him into a shop window. There he stood like a mannequin behind the glass. Hats were placed on him, coats were tried, people laughed and pointed. The man remained silent. Because by then he knew even if he spoke, no one would hear him. He no longer belonged to himself. He was no longer a person in the eyes of the crowd. He was an object, a display. This was not just a joke. It revealed how easily a person can lose his identity and become a thing in the eyes of others. A small difference, a coat, a sign was enough. From that moment his existence was no longer his own, but the meaning others placed on him. At first the man only felt discomfort. But soon he began to doubt himself. Maybe I really am nothing more than a figure for them. Maybe I am no one at all. The image created by the crowd began to replace his own sense of self. Eventually the crowd grew bored and left. The man stepped out of the window and kept walking. On the surface nothing seemed different. But inside he knew he was no longer carrying himself. He was carrying the image the crowd had created for him. His slow steps took him to the shore. The city was noisy but the sea was silent. He walked into the water and moved farther away. No one called after him. No one stopped him. Because in the eyes of the crowd he had already disappeared long ago. The Man in the White Coat is a short but striking story. And it shows us the tragedy of the modern individual. In the crowd, being noticed is rarely freedom. It is often isolation. To be visible does not make us unique. It turns us into objects for others. The greatest danger is when we begin to see ourselves through the same lens and lose our own identity. The story seems absurd, but it is familiar. Even today we live under constant observation, constant judgment. We often do not live as we are, but as the image others project onto us. And that is why Oğuz Atay's story still asks us, how many of us truly live our own lives? And how many of us fade away in the gaze of others?